Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to Coffee Shop Chatter with Mr. Controversy. So today I'm gonna kind of talk about this latest news of the 8 individuals that were captured in New York, Los Angeles, and Philadelphia. Apparently, there's 8 men that possibly have ties to ISIS. I guarantee they came in through the border. That apparently this administration refused to do anything about. Apparently, Biden has so-called tried to push an executive order, which is the executive order that President Trump had put in place addressing the border that Biden rescinded when he came into office. So now all of a sudden he wants to reenact it, but so-called drew up his own, which is follows the exact same guidelines to an extent of what President Trump had. So we're gonna go ahead and get into this video.
8 men from Tajikistan suspected of having ties to ISIS have been arrested following sting operations in New York, Philadelphia, and here in L.A. The suspects had been on the radar of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force. They were arrested by Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, but only after all 8 crossed through the U.S.-Mexico border without being initially flagged. With more, we are joined by global security expert and retired Marine intelligence officer Hal Kempfert. Hal, always good to have you. This is a really scary thought, the fact that they were not red flagged at all. They were here in the U.S. for an unknown amount of time. They're now in custody. What is that vetting process and how did this happen?
Marla, when they come across the border, when they're taken into custody, so to speak, whether they request asylum or whatever else it is, they, of course, check their names, the names they give, or any identification they have with names associated through a variety of federal databases. Those will be checked to see if there's anything out there. I believe this has been tightened up a lot since the San Bernardino shooting. You may remember that Tashfeen Malik, Farouk's wife, who was involved in that shooting, who was a terrorist, she actually gave a fake address that had never been caught in that vetting process. And if they had actually done the full vetting, they would have found out she had a tie to someone who was tied to terrorism, and that was missed. So there's been a lot of things done to correct that since. However, in this case, they got into the country, and they weren't flagged at that point, but they got somehow flagged later on.
Yeah, so what do you think needs to change? Because I get it. I get that things have tightened up, but not, it needs to be tighter.
Obviously it does. And obviously they're going to be going back and looking at what databases did they check. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some initiative back in DC to have the National Counterterrorism Center, NCTC, take a more active role in vetting this. Of course, part of the problem is just the sheer volume of people coming across the border illegally somewhat overwhelms the system. So when they say they did a thorough and complete vetting, I always take that into a kind of with a grain of salt, saying, well, you got so many people you have to process.
Yeah, which, we heard from the Biden administration last week about tightening up the borders. They're extremely porous, and we're seeing the influx of people, so we'll see if that makes a difference. Let's talk about this country of Tajikistan, because many of those who were behind the Moscow Opera House attack that killed more than, 130 people earlier this year, those suspects were from Tajikistan. Why does that country appear to be becoming a breeding ground for ISIS?
Well, there's a lot of economic desperation in Tajikistan. There are a number of ethnic Tajiks that actually work in Russia. They're kind of second-class citizens. They don't have a lot of the freedoms and rights that ethnic Russians have in Russia. And because of that, there's phenomenal frustration. This is what ISIS-K or ISIS Khorasan, this is a Central Asian version of ISIS. This is what they've been basically feeding upon, recruiting upon, and basically pulling them in. So Tajikistan's become, and ethnic Tajiks from that region have become a new area of interest, if you will, in terms of where this terrorist threat could come from. Certainly, we've seen the attack that ISIS did in Iran. We saw the Moscow attack at the Crocus Theater and at the mall in general. And now we're seeing this threat. I think you're going to see a lot more focus on ISIS-K in general, but also ISIS-K recruitment of ethnic Tajiks.
Any intelligence, Hal, on whether these 8 suspects were close to planning an attack? If 8 got through, there's got to be others.
Well, there is apparently there was a phone intercept, a wiretap, if you will, where one of them was talking about bombs, and also there was talk about doing something that would be bigger than the Boston Marathon bombing. Now, and from what I can tell, it looks like at least one of them may have somehow wandered into an ongoing terrorist investigation involving a joint terrorism task force and the FBI, and was picked up on a wiretap, probably talking to somebody who is already under investigation. Of course, once you hear something like that, you would immediately look at them, you would look at their phones, whoever they call. You start to do the link analysis, if you will, the associations, the network analysis, who they talk to, and then you put it together, and that's where you get 8 individuals brought into this, not being charged with terrorism, but being deported nonetheless.
Okay, well, we will certainly keep a watch. Retired Marine Intelligence Officer Hal Kempfert, thank you so much.
Thank you, Marla.
So there you have it. So I'm gonna tell you what issues I see. First, yes, our border patrol, they're undermanned. So one way they could have fixed that was back in April, they had this little thing called a supplemental bill that was signed that was worth $95 billion, $96 billion that went to Ukraine, Taiwan, and Israel. That same money could have been diverted for the border so you could hire more personnel, pay them more money, because that's the problem. They're not making enough money. Pay them enough money, get them the necessary equipment that they need, which is one. So there's this camera, it's a biometrics camera. If these guys were on the FBI's wanted list or whatever type of list that they have, they could have developed, I know they have a database, use the same database that they use, and install that database on those cameras. You can upload the data on there. So whenever people start coming through the border, only thing, the border patrol has to do is, hey, they just take the camera, they take your picture, and pretty much it does this point of contact, and your information shows up. It'll tell you who they are, where they may have been. You can put it to where it will show last time they were in contact as far as coming in through the border. So all that issue of them coming in, a lot of stuff could be alleviated. But instead, we too worry about giving everybody else money instead of putting the money where it needs to be. So that's one way that can have been addressed. 2, I'm going to let you know. And I'm pretty sure people those who pay attention to what goes on around them can see it. We're going to have, maybe not to the extent of a 9/11, but maybe of the Boston Marathon, probably somewhere in between there. We're going to have one of those because entirely many people have come through that border down the Eagle Pass, down in Arizona and California, and nobody knows who's came through the border. Nobody. So 8 guys, how long had they been there? I can tell you 8 guys, if they split up like that, there are cells. So I'm pretty sure they have little, these little, I would call them little terrorist cells set up in all these cities, and they just coordinate. And nobody really knows who's who. That's just the way they operate. They will have people come here and, it may be five people that's going to different cells, and nobody knows who's in the other cells. And it's done that way. So in the event that someone's captured, like those 8 that got captured, they they don't know what the other cells, somebody in another cell is doing, but then they also can't identify who those other people are. Because honest, when it comes to interrogation in the US, it's off. I'm personally, I'm all for waterboarding. There's other things that you could do that will make people talk. And it's not even physical. It's more of a mental thing that you can make people talk. But hey, I want to hear what you guys think. You know, as far as issues with this administration not doing what needs to be done, issues with us giving these countries all this money. Come on, 95, 96 billion dollars. It's a lot we can use to address things that's going on here in this country instead of worrying about everybody else and come up with an excuse for giving them money. So, November's coming around. There's a lot of seats that will be coming open. Um, our walking zombie that we got in there now, he's gonna be out. There's nowhere I can see him, legitimately winning. I think the Senate needs to go through an overhaul, and Congress needs to go through an overhaul. All these old people that's been up there since their darn 30s and now they're in their damn 80s and 90s, whatever. They got to go. We need fresh blood, but people who actually think about this country other than worrying about everybody else. Because why are we, and to say we, because the money we get everybody else is coming from our pockets. We're funding it. So why are we giving all these countries, all this money, but we can't take care of our own that's right here in this country? So I'm going to just leave it at that.